I'm Kelly.
I'm Rich.
And we are Wonderful Adventures.
In last week's video, you saw me making these. Now before we can put them in the bus, there are a few things we need to do. So today we're going to be installing our DC to DC charger, our shore power in, and a couple of other bits and bobs.
As always, please leave us comments below and let us know how you are.
Previously, we installed our MPPT and solar, and now that we have our solar set up for our leisure batteries, but our poor old starter batteries are suffering at the moment, I've bought a 24-volt Victron battery charger, and I'm going to hook that up now to just reduce the batteries. They do come with a 3-pin socket on the end, which is good. And then here, basically you've got your plus and minus, which can take up to 10mm squared cable. So what I'm going to do is just make up a short run using this twin flex stuff that I've got. On the end of here I need to put a pair of lugs, and then I'm going to put some ferrules on the other end, and then we'll hook it up and see how it goes. I love the ferrules because you just got no chance of having sort of splayed wires when you put in there, and you just, I don't know, you just seem to get a really tight connection, which is good. Right, let's hook this thing up. Okay, so normal mode is fine. Should be. So the 24-volt charger has been running actually now for about 2 weeks, which is might sound crazy because it didn't take that long. It only took a matter of hours to charge it. But I wanted to see how it would run off of the solar, and it's run fine. And it put itself in storage mode. I'm going to disconnect it now because even though it does have storage mode, I kind of don't trust it. But the reason why I wanted to charge the batteries, apart from keeping them fit and healthy, was that we are going to fit our DC to DC charger today. And to be able to do that and test that, we need obviously our starter batteries to be able to start the bus. The reason why we want to install a DC to DC charger is basically to give us 30 extra amps of charge as we're driving along, just to keep the batteries topped up, in addition to our solar panels that are on the roof. And then we're hoping that that will give us enough to not have to use our shore power, but we are going to have that as an option. And we'll explain that a bit later.
We decided to go with a 24 to 12 volt DC to DC charger because our Vario is 24 volt and our other side of the leisure side is 12 volt. We decided to go with the isolated version of the DC to DC charger because it will be going into different voltage of batteries with different voltages, and also it doesn't have to have a shared ground, so you can have different ground.
So the first thing that you need to do, if you haven't, before you start any install, is remove this wire bridge from your DC to DC charger before you begin. It looks like this. And then you're ready to wire up the output side to your leisure battery. So we're going to wire up the piece of cable that's going to run from the output up to the links. And we're going to use 16mm cable. As per the instructions, you could actually use a smaller diameter of cable here. But we're just going to use the maximum one because you can, and because we've got it lying about. The insulation on this stuff that I bought is so thick, it's much thicker than normal 16mm cable, which is really good because, you know, it's well protected against wear and tear and just from heat protection when the cable is being used. Now the crimpers that I've got for this are just normal ratchet crimpers, but what I've found is actually you're better off putting them in the vise and doing the vise up because it requires that much pressure. Get an excellent crimp, but it's a lot of effort. Our crimps actually crimp the ferrule into like a rectangular shape, which the DC to DC charger inputs, they just didn't like that. So what I've done is I've squashed it in the vise so they're round again. I'm just going to do a little bit more on this red one. To just make sure that they fit in there. Just, it sounds weird, but almost gently, so we're making them just as round as we can be. The interesting thing is actually, these aren't screw terminals in the DC to DC charger. They're more like clamp terminals, so that it's more than fine to use them without the ferrules on there. But I like to do it because when you put it in there, it looks a bit neater, and actually at the same time you're going to make sure that you don't have any sort of strands of
copper touching each other, because you'll see in a minute that the terminals where they go in are actually quite close together. So anyway, we're going to go and put this in the vehicle now and measure it. This is our links. I'll take the lid off. You'll see here we've got a spare fuse holder, and then we've got a spare negative and a spare positive terminal here, and that is where this is going to route to. So what I'm going to do is just check how long this cable needs to be. Roughly, I have a little bit more but not much. So this is coming in off of the output side. Because the input's going to come from the vehicle batteries later. It's going to run along in this trunk and up there. So we need it to be roughly about that on the red and a bit shorter on the black.
Great.
That's the scientific way of doing it.
Snippy snip snip.
Then we strip the cable, crimped on the lugs, and then we heat shrunk it up so it'll all look nice and tidy. Right, now I'm just going to go install this in the van.
Fingers crossed.
Switch all this off, I don't want it to be live. Right, we're okay, it is dead, everything's off. So, the back here you've got a lug, which is where the negative will go, the negative side. I'm going to put that in there. DC charger. The wires and stuff that come through this has just been setting, so we're also using the conduit and P-clips to make sure it's not moving anywhere, but really there's quite a lot of cable that goes into these systems. Right, let's pop this in here. This was fiddly but manageable. Did take a little while to get them just right. Right, the cable is 16mm cable, and we're going to use a 60 amp mega fuse just to protect that cable. On the links, you basically have your fuse, you pop on the big washer, the spring washer, and then the nut. It's the same process on both the positive and the negative side. And now that those cables are in for the output side to the links and the fuse is in, we need to install the cables at the battery end of our vehicle, the start batteries, which in ours is under the seats. In a previous video I ran a cable in conduit underneath the van from the front all the way to the back, and it comes out here. So what we need to do next is install a breaker and some lugs at the front of the vehicle. Okay, so I'm at the front of my bus. Kelly's popped it in because this is going to involve drilling out through a metal box, and for some reason she doesn't like flying metal shards, whereas, you know, I embrace that. I was born in the metal shards. Anywho, up here we have our 16mm cable that needs to pass through into our battery box, and likewise we have this 10mm cable that we want to bring out of the box for our charger, and I'm going to actually hook that up to an Anderson connector in the near future, so I can connect and disconnect our 24-volt battery charger easily. What I need to do is figure out where I'm going to pass a hole through this box and drill that out, and I'm going to use this 32mm grommet, which it looks huge, but actually because of the depth of the cable and stuff, it's going to be about right. Just to neaten things up. Chuck into the mix that we have to install a breaker on this end. And we've got a little bit to do on the side of the box. It's drill time. I marked this out on masking tape, drilled it out, filed it, and then painted it with some black hammerite. Alright, I'm going to hoover up these shards in a second. Always do that. But you can see the cable is now passing in through here. I am going to drill a different gland out for my charger, because I think I want it to come out the other side. But that looks quite good. It looks quite neat. So we've got that passing through into there now. And I've drilled an existing hole out a little bit larger to mount my circuit breaker. So what I'm going to do now is wire it up outside of the bus. Yes, I will need to put a cable on inside that's already run up through the floor, but the out cable I'm going to do on the bench just because it's easier and less fiddly to do that, probably a bit quicker too. So just like before, we're going to wire on a 8mm lug on the end of this on the 16mm cable. This is the anatomy of a circuit breaker. Basically, you've got a battery side, so where the cable is going to come from the battery to the breaker, and then you have a load side. So in our case, the load will be the DC to DC charger, and that's where I'll connect the cable in the van that runs to the back of the van. So I'm going to wire this one on here. I'm going to keep the end nice and long so I can run it how I please. 3, 2, 1. And there we have it. I've wired it that way around because when it's wired into the bus, that's going to be the direction that it's going to come in. So I've decided to install it in here. It's kind of just in out of the way. Obviously it's off at the moment. The next thing I need to do is to cut the cable that's going to the DC to DC charger, put a lug on there and there, put this on the negative side, and then this one will go on the positive side over here with this lug. Yeah, we're just stripping the cables and getting the lugs on. When you're in the van like this, it's so much easier with two people because one of you can hold the lug on, which is undoubtedly in an awkward position, whilst the other one, you know, operates the crimper. It's better with two players, I would say.
Yeah. Right, I'm putting the camera down so I can hold it.
So ignore this bit. This I'm going to route out through the other side. But you can see this is all nice and neat now with the breaker down in there. The breaker is off, so we can go and wire up into the DC to DC charger at the back. Put these on and then put these in. It's the next job.
Yeah.
3, 2, 1, done.
So now the input cables are connected, we can go and switch on the breaker and see if it works. Right, we put it on and then we did a slight panic because it wasn't working, but it just takes a while to kick in, doesn't it?
Yeah.
For the Bluetooth to kick in.
I can see it now.
So it's
in the
working.
Victron Connect. So let us enter our settings. At the moment it's set to power supply. We want it to be set to a charger. Battery settings. So in here, factory default, that is incorrect. So we want to change that to select preset, and then we go Victron gel Victron deep discharge, which is what our profile is. And then if you want, you can go and check, but the absorption voltage 14.4 volts, float voltage 13.8. That all looks good. Now we can connect the load. You do that by replacing the little bridge. This here is the little bridge.
Yeah, little green bridgie.
So if you wanted to, if you were so inclined, you could wire 2 wires in here to a switch, and then you could switch this off and on wherever you are. We can do that via the app, but you could do it with a
switch as well.
Switch as well if you wanted to. So yeah, no output voltage on there at the moment, which is correct. So if we go start up the bus, we should get some output voltage.
Nothing's exploded.
Pardon?
Nothing's exploded.
Yeah.
So that's good.
So we now have a charge voltage of 14.4 volts. And we are charging people. There's some bulk at the moment. Happy days, so we're on charge at the moment. So that's the Orion installed, and
All working. Really pleased, aren't we?
yeah, pretty good.
Yeah.
So we've got 2 charge sources now, the solar on the roof and the Orion DC to DC charger. And the final charge source for the moment anyway that we're going to install is our shore power in. Alrighty, so our shore power at the moment is we've got a cable run up through the floor into an RCBO and going into our multi-plus inverter, but at the moment the other end is actually not connected to anything. I bought a box to cut through the side of the van, like your standard motorhome box, and I was going to install that, but I've decided against it. I'm going to go for a Slimline version instead. So in the week I bought off the shelf reeler cable, and this was attached to it, but I decided to remove this and replace it with a Slimline version that you see here, and that was fairly straightforward. So I just took the old Commando connector off of the end, stripped the cable, installed this unit and put it on as you see here. And what that hopefully will allow me to do is to install a much more slimline version of an outlet. You can see it here in this bag on the bus. Now, because I'm installing this outside of the van, it's not going through the wall into the inside, I'm going to use one of these. So this is basically what you would put your solar cables through the roof on. I'm going to mount it on the inside skirt of my van, so then this will pass through the van into it, creating a watertight enclosure. Take the cable from under the bus that's there already and pop it in this conduit. I'm going to screw that up to the floor underneath, because our floor, if you remember, is made of plywood. Once that was done, we were looking for some symmetry, so I measured up where I wanted to drill through the 20mm hole, and then went through with a pilot hole before finally using a 19mm bit. I backed it with some wood, drilled it through, and Bob's your uncle. Remember I said 20mm? Well, I fouled out the extra bit. Right, let's drill the next bit now. Okay, next thing we're going to do is going to paint that hole up with some Hammerite. A couple of coats. I've pilot holed out where the screws are going to come through on here, so I can get some paint in there too. Right, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to fit this gland box on the back. I'm going to cut back the conduit, so because it's going to run basically into the end of one of these. I'm going to need to seal up one of these. I'm just going to do that by putting a bolt in the end and tightening it up, because I only need one entry point. Long-term followers will laugh at this. I've broken loose with the trusty panel wipe, and then underneath here you can see why. Let me show you. Let me crawl under for the sake of YouTubes. I've cleaned the surface that this box is going to go over here. So it's got a clean surface to go to. You can see how dirty it was under here, but that's nice and clean now. Squeaky clean. So we can just pop some of this Puraflex. It's like Sikaflex, but it's not. It's from Toolstation. Boat people use it, so I've been using it for quite a lot of things. Right, that's a fat bead there. When I squish this up, it'll splurge out the sides, which is what you want. I am not good at this, and it will look untidy, but it will be waterproof. This was fiddlier than a fiddler doing fiddling, but we got there. This stuff takes ages to go off. However, it is pretty good at grabbing and staying in place. I'm just gonna clamp it up just for my lunch break. Alright, I've got a few things here. Cable stripper for the outer sheath. Cable cutter, cut it off. And then I've got this automatic cable stripper for the inside. Now what we're going to do here is cut it off, snip. We're going to fit some ferrules and we're going to wire them into here. What you've got here on the back, you've got the earth point here. Okay, earth symbol. Number 1 and number 2. In my install, to keep it simple, the number 1 is the live, and number 2 is the neutral. And then we know that that's going to follow all the way through into the van, back into the corresponding connection that we're going to make later. That was tightened up with some stainless steel screws, and then I took the time to actually seal this up with some black sealant too. This bit isn't the prettiest, but it should be waterproof.
It's testing time.
The neat thing about this is they both have their own lids, so they're IP67 rated. I'm just going to use my extension cable here. So I've installed it so the pins are upwards, so you pop it in, it's kind of got little things to guide it in. And you do it up, and then that's waterproof, protected then. All we need to do is switch ourselves on. And then it's a bit anticlimactic, but that's it. Because you can notice here that the charger will ping on in a minute. Probably won't do it now. There we are.
There we are, yay!
Yeah, if you have a look at our VRM, just loading that up. It's been a bit wonky today. Going into Wonderbus. You can see that we've got 415 watts coming through the grid. It is charging via this. And our AC loads are running through it as well because it's got pass through. So that's all up and running now.
Yay! Whoop, whoop, whoop.
It's neat, doesn't it, too?
Yeah, that's really cool. I don't think you've noticed it, it's so tiny. Like when it's not all plugged in.
There we have it. We have our shore power installed. We have our battery to battery installed. So a couple more charge sources.
We are super pleased, aren't we? Thanks as always for watching, and we will see you next week.
Take care, guys.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Bye.